Hi, my name's Steve. I'm a grateful believer who struggles with anger, depression, anxiety, and chemical addiction. Um, while we're practicing social distancing, wow, I almost said social addiction, we'd like to bring you a testimony to get you through the week. This is my friend Chris. I met him, I guess, over a year ago. Wow, time's been flying. Not somebody that I thought I would be friends with. That's just how it goes. I get that vibe from people, but it's weird. It's weird to me how invaluable he's become to me in my recovery over the last year or so. He's got a way of just cutting through the bull and getting straight to the issue, and he's really had a good habit of really, giving me a hug when I need one and giving me a punch in the gut when I need one. And a lot of times I just need to wake up and come to the realization that I don't know everything. And he reminds me of that on a regular basis. He's a very dear friend. And Chris, this is him.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Chris. I'm a grateful believer, and I struggle with anger and depression. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Chris.
I feel like I should have a crowd here. This is different for us, but we're gonna try this recorded. After spending several years in Celebrate Recovery, I've learned that anger and depression are my daily habits or struggles. But my hang-up is lack of trust and control. The beginning cause of my trust issues, well, that's abandonment. That's my hurt. At first, I was not sure why I had abandonment issues. I was raised by a really good family with a great mom, a great dad, 4 of my siblings. My parents believed in God, and we regularly attended what I thought to be a good church. I would later find out that it was somewhat of a cult, and they talked about a God who was controlling and angry. They taught me to accept and serve anyone who believed as I did, but to shun and disown everyone who did not believe like me. Even though the church talked about Jesus, I didn't learn anything about a forgiving God who accepted me the way I was. To add to that theme, the hero of my life, my dad, was sometimes angry and controlling towards me. I received inappropriate levels of corporal punishment and shaming throughout my childhood. My family of origin was a very passionate, very loud Italian family who would support each other and defend each other. However, we defended each other even during abusive behavior, and we tiptoed around many angry family members, or when the mood was right, we just disowned you. We wouldn't speak to you for years and years. Oftentimes, we would come back together with family members and start the relationship back again without amends or restoration or any kind of resolution of the original issue. Without closure, often the same conflict would rise up again, and the whole process would repeat. My mom had been distant and emotionally unavailable. As much as I tried, I was not able to connect with her on an intimate level, and this has troubled our relationship to this day. My parents both loved me strongly, but every move that I made was criticized and judged harshly. Just like the God that I learned about in church, their love could be withdrawn at a moment's notice. At least in my mind it could. The combination of these 3 parents gave me a feeling of insecurity. I felt like my mom and dad and my Heavenly Father loved me passionately, but would put me out of the family as soon as I messed up. As the oldest child, I acted out towards my siblings by being physically and verbally abusive to them at every opportunity. I controlled their behaviors, I judged their motives, I passed on punishments accordingly. However, I didn't hold these standards to myself. I discovered my grandfather's pornographic magazines and secretly moved them almost 70 miles, and I stored them in a hay barn. I passed out this graphic material to my younger siblings, to younger neighborhood kids. My narcissism and selfishness was in full bloom even before middle school. So was my objectification of women that made me a judgmental person for physical bodies, but this spilled over into judging all behaviors and all motives also. As a teenager, I began performing to high levels in school and outside activities to receive recognition and admiration. I felt like nothing that I did was ever good enough. I would begin a series of flirting with different female classmates that never materialized into any serious connections. I began acting out for attention, often by consuming alcohol, smoking pot, and eventually getting caught stealing cars. I never really enjoyed the drugs or alcohol, but I very much enjoyed the attention during high-risk activities. And certainly, I enjoyed a shiny object, the company of people who were more exciting than me. I graduated at the very top of my high school class, then I graduated at the top of my technical school, and I got a job immediately. I moved away from my support system in Pennsylvania to a faraway land called Connecticut. The only thing I remember during my young adult years is the high-risk activities and pitiful, feigning attempts to latch on to every young lady I could meet. The distant memories of pornography and my insecurity fueled a growing sexual addiction that I never really acted upon because I was so obsessive compulsive and legalistic, and I held myself to higher standards. In hindsight, that was white knuckle sobriety. At work, I was highly self-critical, just like in my personal life, and I succeeded in increasing levels of responsibility until I held a salary position with Delta in Atlanta. I became one of the best in the world in my field, but refused any leadership position. I was more comfortable in an expert role where I could keep trade secrets to myself and make myself even more valuable. My communication reflected this, always making everyone feel stupid or less than, but never taking responsibility to help others learn. Even though I thought myself to be reliable, I refused to commit to anything like volunteer work or leadership of any kind, really. After several failed courting relationships, I found my soulmate. Her beauty was intoxicating, but her vibrant personality was even more intoxicating. She had come from an alcoholic home, and my reliability was super attractive to her. So she tolerated my insecurity and my judgmental, legalistic, know-it-all attitude about everything. However, her low self-esteem gave her a know-it-all attitude, and we battled for control in the relationship. After living together for a year or more, the on-again, off-again relationship ended. I hastily married a coworker who was very much like me. She was emotionally unavailable and super legalistic, and we played a dance of insecurity for several months until we divorced. Not only did I damage her life by my impulsive decision, but I damaged her 3-year-old child, and I damaged all my family and friends who attended the wedding. I returned to my radiant, shiny object and began dating again, hoping that I could tame my wild girl. If I could spoil her enough, if I was trustworthy enough, and if I was persistent enough. Finally, I was not making any progress in fixing her, so I took her to Las Vegas to marry her. Surely that would take care of things, and she would finally trust me. Get married, that'll fix it. I damaged all my family and friends once again because we didn't even have a wedding, because I was sure it wouldn't even last. With the absence of stress, we had a wonderful early marriage, but it was short-lived. As soon as the real life started to set in, the wheels came off. We struggled with infertility, with intimacy issues, and conflict management. We both acted out by spending above our means, and we tried to solution the infertility without working together. I manipulated the social workers, and I portrayed a model marriage and a happy home so that we could be approved for foster care. Soon we adopted 2 beautiful children from the state system. The family started to fall apart the day we adopted the youngest child, with my wife threatening harm and moving out on the very same day. Around this time, my wife insisted that we raise our children in church, so I begrudgingly agreed to find a church only in order to please her, and hoping it would fix the situation. After several months of visiting the church, Christ convicted me that maybe I wasn't as perfect as I thought I was, and I needed the blood of Jesus. I surrendered my life to him in August of 2001. Ezekiel 36:26 says, "I will give you a new heart, and I will put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh." It was a really good trade for me. I got a new heart in exchange for the rock that I had carried around for so long in my life. I was transformed nearly overnight from a selfish miser to a generous giver. I gave my time, my talent, and my treasure, serving in the church cafeteria, serving in men's ministry, tithing for the very first time. However, my wife and I weren't growing together spiritually. We went back to our old ways of working independently, solving issues as 2 competing people. This started several years of me demanding that my wife be the perfect caregiver, loud fights, destruction of household items, slamming doors, several domestic violence calls to our home. Once I went to jail for several days after I acted out as a martyr in a fight. I didn't do anything to deserve jail that night, but I'd done many violent things other times that I didn't go to jail for, and I should have. My wife was never reliable enough or even holy enough for me. We were separated several times, even once retaining lawyers, maybe twice, I don't know, going through a custody battle for the children. Every time, a little hope, just a little bit of hope, but a whole lot of insecurity brought us back together. We also had some good years in our marriage. We led a large children's ministry at our church for over 2 years. These were wonderful times. Even though Christ had transformed my giving, I was growing more legalistic and more religious each year, returning to my comfort level of my childhood religion. Throughout my teen years and my young adulthood, I had a tendency to rescue friends who were living irresponsible lives. Often I was drawn to troublemakers and people using drugs. For many years, I thought I was doing the right thing by helping them, but it was really an escape from my boring, rule-following life. After becoming a Christian, I was sure the most Christ-like thing I could do was help people. I constantly paid their rent, I bought them meals, I retained DUI attorneys for them. Generally, I was keeping them out of trouble. It was easy for me to rationalize all this because it seemed to line up with biblical thinking. However, I later learned that all this gift-giving that I was doing had conditions attached. I visited Celebrate Recovery for the very first time in the spring of 2008, seeking a way for me to relate to my alcoholic and drug-using close friends and family. When I attended 101 and Open Share, I could not think of any issues that I had. Christ had redeemed me. I was happier about my faith life than I'd ever been. Some of you were snickering, like my brother here, because I just read off some violent stuff and jail time and pride and judgmentalness and pornography addiction. I think the word you're searching for is denial. Yes, that's the magic word that keeps us out of recovery. Since I didn't have any issues that CR could help me with, I lost interest and I didn't return for nearly a year. In March of 2009, I was visiting a family member in a rehab hospital, attending a class at a behavioral institution for support and to get an extra visit. The leader of the family class at the hospital led patients to create a list of our physical, emotional, and spiritual problems. The patients in recovery identified chronic health issues, anxiety, depression, and some really serious opinions about God. The counselor proposed that they were addicts, and this was the cause of their problems, or the result of their problems. But either way, they had problems. Makes complete sense, right? So then, we family members made a list of our physical, emotional, and spiritual problems. The list was identical. The class facilitator gave me the bad news first. I was an addict. I was addicted to the patient. I was addicted to people. The facilitator gave me the good news next. The treatment for such an addiction is a 12-step program. It took a secular institution for God to show me that codependency was an addiction to people and that it was causing me so much emotional pain. I returned the very next week to Celebrate Recovery for my recovery, not my family's recovery, or to support anyone else. Philippians 2:12 tells us to work out our salvation. My childhood anger and control issues were exposed by my marriage, not caused by my marriage or caused by irresponsible family and friends, like I had been telling everyone for years. My walk with Christ saved me from hell, but I had a lot of the sanctification process to work. Celebrate Recovery helps me to work that process. The first door of CR that I walked through was one of the main event. That's where you're sitting when you attend to Celebrate Recovery for the very first time. That's where people loved and accepted me exactly where I was and how I was. They loved me through dinner, and they didn't ask me any probing questions at all, like they would at a church or like I thought they would. The second door of Celebrate Recovery was called Open Share. It's a share group. Within the safety of the 5-group guidelines, I was able to open up about the dysfunctional ways I was living in my life. During a time when I considered myself a maturing Christian, the healing was going deeper. And that's what you'll experience right after the services of Celebrate Recovery is a sharing group. The third door of Celebrate Recovery that I entered was the step study, the 12-step study. This is where the sharing got real. This is where I came to really trust the other men in the group, and I really started telling the truth. about what went on in my head and what I was doing in my life. This is where I got my first sponsor. I shared my down and dirty, honest inventory with myself, with God, and just one person that I could trust. The focus for my first step study was codependency, obviously. That's what I've been talking about the whole time. I had to get free from rescuing my friends and family. I had to get honest that my volunteering to be used by people was also making me bitter and angry. I found out that I needed to be liked. I needed to be their God for them, which is no God at all, and it even got in the way of them seeing the God. In my next step study, a year and a half later, where I was a co-leader, I found myself relapsing in codependency with my teenagers. I battled for a bitterness towards those that I had helped. I started to be more aware that I was reacting because I felt rejected by their rejection of help. Man, I was complicated. A few years into my recovery, and several more rehab hospital visits for me to visit other family members, one of my teenagers started into some rebellion. I relapsed again in rescuing, control, and anger, landed me back in jail for domestic violence again. This time against my most precious commodity, my daughter. Did you hear that possession? My daughter. Since I felt like she was mine, I was going to get her the help that she needed, whether she wanted to or not. The flesh dies very, very hard, especially mine does. I don't know about yours. I was awakened to my controlling behavior with my kids and my coworkers. My resentment with my dad and my mom and my wife was brewing underground. And now I was letting another generation use me, and I was angry because I was letting them use me. I was really angry at me. Celebrate Recovery offers me the place where the people just love me where I am, and they let God deal with me. By the third step study, I learned to just lighten up. For some reason, the process brought me true serenity, and all the small things just faded away. They just didn't matter to me anymore, these small aggravations. By the way, all of us who have put our trust in Christ are going to heaven one day together. And that's a pretty good reason to lighten up right there. Mm-hmm. I use my sponsor and accountability team. I broadened my transparency to my church and my Sunday school, and then even my work family at my office. I made amends with my parents, my wife, and my children. I started to see that my perception of betrayal, abandonment, and disrespect, my original pain point, my insecurity, triggered all this anger that I was having. These are the moments when I realize, hey, maybe this person really doesn't like me, and that's okay. John 12:43 says, "For they loved human praise more than the praise of God." I think I lived the first part of my life. The first 50 years of my life, loving human praise more than the praise of God. Let's see if I can get it right in the second 50 years. At extended family gatherings with my siblings and parents, I get to watch the drama. I get to listen to the drama, but I don't participate. I'm a better listener. I treat them as God treats me, just like the Serenity Prayer says, taking, as Jesus did, the sinful world as it is and not as I would have it. When I resist taking things personally, it's easier for me to be objective. Recovery is an attractive leadership posture. My family sees a new piece in me. I use I, me, and my statements, and it diffuses conflict rather than making it worse. In fact, I use the 5-group guidelines in my home and in my office. They work that well. If you want to read about them, they're on the Celebrate Recovery app. The app is wonderful. It's got the 12 steps and the 8 principles and the 5-group guidelines. Amazing. Since my third step study, each one of the 5 homes from my birth family has asked me specifically about my faith. I had been a believer for 8 years prior to starting to Celebrate Recovery, but they didn't notice until I entered recovery and began walking out my faith. I've even sponsored family members and friends, co-workers in recovery programs only God can facilitate, sponsoring those that are closest to us. Recovery does not make life easy or even perfect. I often attend church alone. My insecurity issues long for that storybook family that all worship together. 10 years into my recovery, that is still very difficult for me. I still have an estranged child that is lost from the family, and more importantly, away from God. That's really, really tough on me. Abandonment or rejection does not mean the end of me or the end of my life. It's something that happens to me but does not define me. I am valued and defined by the love of God and His approval. My job is to carry on His love forward in my purpose, not that my family appears on a postcard, because it really doesn't. It doesn't. I wanted to pick my ministry within my family, but God has chosen a ministry for me many times outside of my family. I didn't willingly accept this at first, but guess what? God didn't leave me in charge. Like I thought He did. Since entering recovery, I've received 2 promotions at work that I hesitantly accepted. That's right, I'm learning to commit. The workplace itself has become a right place for ministry and a safe place for people to heal. Several people I work with are pursuing step studies, partly because of my transparency during my job. After nearly a decade, my wife started pursuing her own recovery, and she serves side by side with me as an apprentice training coach and an open chair leader. My children have benefited from the children's programs, Celebration Place, and the Landing Teen Group at Celebrate Recovery. I've been ordained as a minister in my church. I'm a chaplain at a truck stop ministry. I give back as part of Step 12 as a Newcomers 101 leader, an open chair leader, a training coach, and now I'm apprenticing to be a state rep for Celebrate Recovery. I'm taking Celebrate Recovery into men's prisons as part of the outpouring of hope that I have found. I've sponsored several men through CR, outside of CR, as a result of the wisdom and serenity that God gave me, not the wisdom and serenity that I have within myself. I'm about to start my 5th step study, where I'm beginning to work on food and sexual addiction issues. As much as my salvation experience radically transformed my life, these leadership positions and areas of influence would not have been possible without the healing steps of Celebrate Recovery. I would encourage you to dig deep and go through that second door and join an open chair group just as soon as you visit your next Celebrate Recovery. They meet directly after the main event. Try exchanging phone numbers with the wonderful people of these programs and gain accountability. Call them. We all struggle and we all need that lifeline. Consider that third door by finding a step study in an area near you. Celebrate Recovery has given me peace that I never even knew was possible. Thank you for letting me share.
Thanks for sharing, Chris. Well, again, my name's Steve. I'm still a grateful believer who struggles with anxiety, depression, and anger and chemical addiction. Man, I just want to let you know what an inspiration you are and how pleasant it is to hear your story every time. I relate to it so much. Thank you very, very much, and thank you for being my friend. During these times when the churches are closed and the schools are closed, we don't get out as much as we'd like to. So it's important that we don't isolate. Because of that, I'd really encourage you strongly to stay in touch with your accountability, family, friends, people that you're in contact with in CR. I can't speak for anybody else, but I know I'm no good alone. Ecclesiastes 4:9 through 12 says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow, but woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if 2 lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. And also, the book of Proverbs says, as iron sharpens iron, one person sharpens another. So stay in contact, keep each other accountable, and thank you for letting me share. We hope you have a great week, and as soon as everything calms down and everybody's safe, we look forward to seeing you again at main event on Fridays. Thank you for letting me share.
Thanks for sharing, Steve.